Hello everyone, my name is Karishma Barrow, and today I'll be going over the issue of colorism, how it affects race and perpetrates racism in our educational K through 12 settings, how it affects our students and our professionals in the field, and finally, what can be done to implement change. So before we get started, I wanted to give all of you a little bit of a preview of what will be talked about today. The first part will be an overview and more of a definition on what systemic racism is. Then, following that, will be defining colorism and a little bit of a background on that. Then, implications in K through 12 educational settings through the research I've done and the academic articles I've decided to present in this presentation. And finally, making change. How can we make this change? What steps can we take to make change, create this domino effect to start building more positive and warmer environments for our students? So, first, we're going to start with our introduction. And for my introduction, I really wanted to start with a quote by Maya Angelou. And the quote says, "Prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, threatens the future, and renders the present inaccessible." I believe that this is such an important quote because it highlights that prejudice has been around for many decades, many years, and I think if we choose to ignore it, it's going to stay, but if we choose to actually address it, then we can start taking those steps to make it better. So, what is systemic racism? So, also known as institutional racism, systemic racism impacts nearly every facet of life for people of color. This type of racism affects the very structure of how our society looks and even feels, which tends to lead to discrimination in employment, housing, healthcare, political power, education, and many more areas of life. I would love to go over all of those areas, but I think we'd need a longer presentation and maybe a series of presentations. But today we're going to be focusing on education. So let's define colorism. So colorism is a prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a darker skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic group or racial group. So oftentimes, skin tone is what colorism is associated with. However, it can be associated also with physical appearance, language the person speaks, socioeconomic status, and as mentioned before, skin tone, and words such as light and white, which make people who don't fall under this category feel less than. So, a little bit of a background. So, brief history. This is actually a worldwide issue in many countries, such as Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America, and here in the United States. Skin color has always played a role in how an individual is treated, whether they are more beautiful because of their skin tone, they are looked as more educated, it's always been played a role. And in the United States, colorism has been around since the enslavement of people, with the preferential treatment of enslaved people with fair and lighter skin complexions, meaning that those who did have that would tend to work indoors, while those who didn't, who had more darker skin complexions, would work outside in the fields. And now, how has it been around in education? Well, colorism has existed in educational settings for many years and in many different forms. To name a few, teacher relationships, peer relationships, how discipline is approached and given to students, and many other aspects. So, implications in K through 12 educational settings. So, through the research, I have found that in a study published in 2013, found that among students sampled, African American girls with the darkest skin tones were 3 times more likely actually to be suspended from school than African American girls with the lightest skin tones. So colorism has always played a role and continues to play a role. Colorism is also found to be the source of interpersonal conflict among students, leading to bullying, harassment, even fighting amongst peers and students. And at the individual level, students can struggle with depression, alienation, body image, and just overall low self esteem. I want to go over the halo effect, and the halo effect is the thought that we allow a positive evaluation about one trait in a person, such as, let's talk about physical attractiveness, influence the appraisal of other aspects of that person's characteristics. So, because we like one thing about a person, we look at all the other traits in this person, whether they're positive or negative, but have already created different attributes that we like about this person. So, how does the halo effect related to colorism look in a classroom? So, lighter skinned students are viewed as more intelligent and kind. They are perceived to have less behavioral problems and are not as punished as often. Now, this idea of elevated status. So, students who have a lighter skin have more positive teacher and peer relationships and are seen as the popular kids and are well liked. And now let's talk about our girls in schools. So, beauty has always been something that has been closely related to social status. But how does it relate to our girls in schools? Well, light skinned students, especially girls, may gain social status at school and are considered to be nice and kind and just looked at as more put together. I also want to talk about parent advocacy for our students. It's important to look at how our parents are also being affected by colorism. So, light skinned parents of color may have an advantage over their darker skinned counterparts when it comes to advocating with teachers and even administrators. White parents have more racial status in society and therefore more power than parents of color, who may even be similar to them in many ways or in all the ways. Because of their white skin tone, they are considered to get more help, more resources, and taken seriously. Now, something to also look at is colorism in relation to the school to prison pipeline. And African American and Latino boys are more likely to be removed from class, more likely to experience in school suspensions, and more likely to be overall expelled from the school entirely because of things that have happened. And due to the growth of the zero tolerance discipline policy in schools across the nation, which is a positive thing, however, has had a negative impact because now that schools are using more school police, it's starting to show up more at schools with Black and Latinx students. So let's make a change. How can we make change and start this domino effect to create our environments that are better for our students? So, at the school level, what can we do? So, school-wide assemblies, monthly themes, culture celebrations, and cultural conversations that we can incorporate in our curriculum to talk about what's going on. We can also include a Heritage Month, group counseling for students who have experienced it or are experiencing it, and clubs that represent our different cultures and our different identities on a campus. And that can be culminated with a cultural fair to really bring our communities closer together. Now, how does it look at the admin level? Well, ongoing staff development around issues of race, color, inclusion are very important, but also this idea of self-reflection is equally important because if we are able to self-reflect and look at our biases, then we're going to help dismantle colorism in our communities. And this can start by hiring a more diverse team of counselors, admin, and teachers, creating a group of people who are ready to combat colorism in our schools. And at the community level, how does this look? Well, community support is very important for our students. So, positive experiences and conversations with others can be an effective intervention for students dealing with the negative effects of colorism. So, what we can do is mentorship programs with people who have experienced this and bring them into our school to have presentations to talk about it And community outreach, just reaching out to our communities, making it more aware that this is an issue that we need to start to fix. And at the individual level, and I add this because it really speak up and use your words. Change is not going to happen unless we are willing to address it. If we're willing to address the inequalities, the discrimination that we are seeing in our schools, then we will be able to start that domino effect. And I think it's very important that one step is better than not taking a step at all. So thank you so much, and I hope that you decide today to start making that change within your communities, within your schools, within yourself, so that we can start creating a better world for everyone. And it shouldn't matter the way you look, it should matter who you are at the end of the day. And these are my references. Thank you so much.